What most likely happened was his detonator was some sort of type of flash powder, like black powder. That initiated and burned him, but did not set off the payload, which is what saved everyone around him.
Brett, when you look at this, how do you think this is going to be received?
Here in New York, look, it happened that the last terrorist attack along the Hudson River bike path ended in my neighborhood, basically at the foot of my building, and it was Halloween. My children were out shopping for Halloween costumes. It was obviously terrifying, but one of the things about New York is the incredible resilience of the city. Kids went trick-or-treating that night. 3 or 4 days later, we had the New York City Marathon, huge event, enormous crowds. People came out to cheer the marathoners. And that sense of resilience, the sense of refusing to be cowed, is essential to a successful approach to terrorism. You mentioned that I'd worked in Jerusalem those years. One of the things that was so striking about the way Jerusalemites responded to one suicide bombing after another is they picked themselves up, they opened cafes that had been bombed, quickly resumed normal life. That is also part of the attempt of success in defeating terrorism, that they cannot ultimately disrupt the desire of free people to go about their lives. So it's essential, as serious as you take an event like this, and it happened right across the street from my office at the New York Times, that you get up and you say we're moving forward with our lives, irrespective of what these people think they can achieve.
And that's what New Yorkers know how to do. I want to bring Bill Cohen of Vanity Fair into the mix. Bill, you and I both lived in New York City when 9/11 happened, and 9/11 certainly didn't stop New Yorkers in downtown Manhattan.
No, and not even.
And you cannot, and by the way, we cannot begin to compare what happened this morning. And I want to add that we just learned from the FDNY that there are 4 injuries total. None are life-threatening. So that underscores the fact that this is so different from what we saw happen in 9/11. But speaking to how New York operates.
Well, Brett is absolutely right. The point of resilience, and perhaps we've learned that from people living in Israel who face this over and over again repeatedly throughout their lives, their day-to-day existence. You know, America is very far removed in many ways. It's separated by 2 very large oceans, and so that's one of the things about 9/11 that freaked everybody out so much and was so extraordinary, was the way that we were seemed so vulnerable at that moment to that kind of attack. And yet, I was here, you were here, New Yorkers were unbelievable during that time. I mean, I've never felt such an incredible spirit of togetherness and emotion and support. It was remarkable, and you know, thank goodness.
Ted Cruz calls them New York values.
There you go. New York values.
I'll take them every day, thank you.
New York values. Doesn't mind a New York paycheck from Goldman Sachs, but New York values, you know what? I'm super proud of those. All right, we're going to keep monitoring this situation in New York. The moment we know more, you will know more. But after a quick break, NBC's exclusive reporting about Special Counsel Bob Mueller and his investigation. Why is he focusing in on 18 days? We're going to tell you why.
Well, they got the guy in custody who committed the crime. And knowing that they have the guy in custody who committed the crime, it was also a pipe bomb. And what happened is the pipe bomb did not work properly. It set off the flare that ended up burning him, but it didn't set off the payload that he had that was going to explode. But it was a pipe bomb that malfunctioned. Now, how stupid are you when your pipe bomb don't work and you went there to kill yourself? Oh, now they finna torture the you-know-what out of them.
This morning, we're going to go back to that scene in just a few minutes. And now to NBC News exclusive reporting on a crucial window of time that may determine whether Robert Mueller can build an obstruction of justice case against President Trump. And I have the best team here to break it down. And first, I want to walk you through exactly what NBC learned. According to 2 people familiar with the investigation, it all starts at the end of December when Mike Flynn calls Russian Ambassador Kislyak to talk sanctions. On January 14th, he lies to Vice President Pence about that conversation. On January 24th, Flynn lies again this time to the FBI. 2 days later, Sally Yates, who was acting attorney general at the time, tells White House counsel Don McGahn that the Justice Department knows Flynn has been lying to the vice president and others. That same day, McGahn takes that information back to the White House and briefs the president. It's what happens from that point that is critical, because 4 days later, on January 30th, President Trump fires Sally Yates, not Mike Flynn, Sally Yates. But it is not until February 13th, nearly 3 weeks after Yates' warning about Flynn, that Flynn himself is forced to resign. In those 18 days, between the time the White House found out Flynn had been lying and the time he was actually pushed out, that Robert Mueller is so focused on. I want to bring in NBC's Carol Lee, who led breaking this massively important story. Carol, explain why these 18 days are so important to Mueller's investigation. And we have to remind our viewers, President Trump, even the day Mike Flynn left that night, I think it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Kellyanne Conway was on TV saying the president stands with Mike Flynn. And then the president, after the fact, said it was the media, we were pushed into this. Mike Flynn's a good guy. So walk us through this.
Right. Well, I think you laid it out really well, Steph, in terms of why these 18 days are so critical. One of the significant things that has come up in our reporting is that people who have been interviewed by Mueller's team believe that he's trying to figure out if there was some sort of cover-up, and to the extent that the president would have had any role or any awareness of that.
Well, I don't have your number, Mr. Williams.
If you put it against
you didn't listen to what I told you.
Tweet last weekend,
you can put it up on my Twitter at Carcino, or you can put it in my message on YouTube.
To the FBI. In terms of the obstruction of justice inquiry, this particular period of time could be very significant in determining when the president knew that Michael Flynn had lied to the FBI, and when others in the administration knew that Michael Flynn had lied to the FBI. Because if you remember, Don McGahn, when he was told by Sally Yates that Michael Flynn could be susceptible to blackmail from the Russians because he wasn't being honest about his conversation with Kislyak, knew that Michael Flynn had also spoken to the FBI, and we spoke to federal prosecutors who've said that the natural thing to do would be to ask Mike Flynn whether he lied to the FBI. So there's a number of things that Bob Mueller would be asking about in terms of that time frame. The other thing that's interesting about this is, we focus a lot on the campaign and what happened in the campaign, and this is another window into what Mueller's team is looking into inside the White House. We know they're looking at the drafting of that statement for the John Jr. Trump Tower meeting on Air Force One, the president's interactions with James Comey, and now we know that he's having witnesses walk him through each of these 18 days to determine what happened.
This is some great reporting. Sorry, Carol Lee's kids. Mom didn't do much Christmas shopping this weekend. Stay with me, Carol. I want to bring my panel in on this. Bret Stephens and Bill Cohen. Bret, to you first. Have we ever gotten a satisfactory explanation from the White House why it took so long to fire Mike Flynn?
No, I don't think we ever have. But this is one of the reasons why the Mueller investigation is so important, and I think it's one of the reasons why the president's apologists and defenders are becoming increasingly so strident in their demands that Bob Mueller be fired, going so far as to even draft speeches for him trying to justify his firing, which is that Mueller is coming closer and closer to uncovering what seems to be a credible obstruction of justice charge coming from the President of the United States himself, as attested to by that tweet.
That the White House or the President's most ardent supporters have yet to make a clear explanation for why it took 18 days or what happened, but they're clearly out there pushing to get Bob Mueller fired. I want to play part of Sally Yates' testimony about her conversation with the White House counsel Don McGahn that took place on January 26th. Please watch this.
Would you tell the White House?
Right. So I told them again that there were a number of press accounts of statements that have been made by the Vice President and other high-ranking White House officials about General Flynn's conduct that we knew to be untrue. We also told the White House counsel that General Flynn had been interviewed by the FBI. Mr. McGahn asked me how he did, and I declined to give him an answer to that. I remember that Mr. McGahn asked me whether or not General Flynn should be fired, and I told him that that really wasn't our call, that was up to them, but that we were giving them this information so that they could take action.
That was Lindsey Graham earlier, who just last night on Twitter informed the Twitterverse how spectacular the Trump golf course he played at was. To you, Bill Cohen, if Don McGahn knew that Mike Flynn lied, and he knew that Mike Flynn was interviewed by the FBI, wouldn't it be a safe assumption for Don McGahn to assume Mike Flynn was lying to everyone else, including the White House?
Yes, and he's made himself incredibly vulnerable, right? Incredibly vulnerable to leverage from the Russians. And I think that's really what's frankly behind what Donald Trump is worried about most of all. He knows that the Russians have leverage over him. He's trying to cover it up in some way, and trying to push it off onto, the Mike Flynns of the world. It's clear that the Russians have something on this. I don't think it's just the Mike Flynns of the world. It can't just be the Mike Flynns of the world. You don't then turn around and then fire the FBI director, Comey, in May if it's just your national security advisor who is somehow vulnerable to leverage from the Russians.
And while President Trump and we're hearing other supporters go after the FBI, we need to point out that Chris Wray has been vehemently supporting the FBI, saying what great men and women are there. And Chris Wray is President Trump's appointment. Carol, I want to go back to the heart of the story, where you have Mueller appears to be interested in whether Trump directed Flynn to lie to senior officials, including Pence or the FBI, and if so, why, the sources said. That sounds like the Mueller team is investigating Trump back into December, not even January or those 18 days.
Well, I think because it all starts back in September, there are a number of questions. We know they're looking into who all knew that Michael Flynn was talking about sanctions with the Russian ambassador. We know that it was his incoming deputy, KT McFarland, but that were there others, and did this go all the way to the president? I think that is the main question when you connect all of these dots. It's essentially, what did the president know, and at what point did he know that? And as it relates to Mike Flynn, was he aware of those conversations? He said that he was not aware that Mike Flynn was talking about sanctions with the Russian ambassador, but he also said that even if he was, he wouldn't have a problem with it because he wouldn't see that was what he was supposed to be doing. So you can't look at those 18 days and Mike Flynn's statements to the FBI and to the vice president and not also look at what happened on that critical day of December 29th when Michael Flynn talked to the Russian ambassador about sanctions.
All right, Carol, please stick around. We're going to revisit this story. We are not done discussing it, but we have to take you back to the Port Authority because we are expecting a press conference on that explosion any minute now. And I want to bring in NBC's Morgan Radford live in New York. Morgan, what more do we know at this point?
Stephanie, this is a rapidly changing scene. I want to show you the police here behind me, hundreds of officers here with long guns, heavy machinery, and they've been here canvassing the scene. Some of them I saw knocking on neighbors' doors, trying to find out what they heard and, if anything, possibly what they saw. And to give you a sense of the timing and where we are now, Stephanie, the first sound was heard at about 7:19, just after 7 a.m., approaching that morning rush hour. And we're just steps away from New York's Times Square, and this happened at New York's Port Authority bus terminal. That's a very popular transit destination here for a lot of New Yorkers. And we spoke to one witness earlier, Christina Bethay, and she said she immediately, when she heard those sounds, she and everyone around her started running. Take a listen. When were you in the explosion?
I was in the subway in the Port Authority.
And what was the first thing you heard?
Boom. Boom. And then I just ran up the stairs.
What's the first thing you did? You ran up the stairs. Did you?
You said boom. You try to say, okay, it's a noise, whatever. It's a noise. And then that's when you see the smoke. And that's when everybody just ran to the closest exit of the stairs at the Port Authority where you get the Greyhound bus at. And then I came out on 42nd and 8th.
And when everyone started running, what went through your mind?
Get the hell out of here.
Now, Christina is originally from North Carolina, and she says that being in New York, at some level, she's almost become desensitized to these things because they're happening with increased frequency. And she says it's in New York, anything can happen. Now, she was just one of the many people who ran. They described this as every man for themselves, as she said. And we're also learning out more details about the suspect. We know that it was a man who was in his 20s, and when that device detonated, officials are still not clear if it was a backpack or a vest or a belt. We have confirmed that he is now in custody in Bellevue Hospital. And Stephanie, also just to give you a mood of things, as people are still trying to get by to work, this has really shut down this main grid. Again, this really serious transit area at this hour. People are coming by, people are looking, and people are asking officers questions. Stephanie?
All right, Morgan Radford. Let's bring in NBC's Ann Thompson, also live at the scene. And as we look at these pictures, we can still see people in the streets. Are businesses open? Is it business as usual around that? I mean, it's 9:30 in the morning on Monday, December 11th. This is a very busy time in New York City.
Stephanie, let me show you a scene that you would never see on a typical Monday morning at 9:30. This is 8th Avenue. It is free of traffic, and I am about 2 blocks south of where Morgan is. And there, that awning that you see on the left-hand side of your screen, that's the entrance to the Port Authority. And it's in there, that's where that explosion happened. The police have done a really great job of controlling access to this area. You can only get here by foot, but New Yorkers are all taking it in stride. Everybody's walking to work as people come by this scene. They get out their cameras, they take some pictures, but people have been really orderly. And all the stores around us, the coffee shops, the restaurants, they're open and ready for business. So the only thing this seems to have disrupted is the traffic and then some of the subways here in New York and some of the bus traffic. Because as Morgan said, the Port Authority is sort of the heartbeat, if you will, of New York's transit system. And to have that disrupted on a Monday morning means it's going to be tough for people to get to work. But what is absolutely striking is that the city has just gone on. They stopped, traffic is stopped here, but not the city itself. People are still going to work, still going about their business, and nobody seems unusually scared or worried. They are curious, yes, but things are still happening as they would on a Monday morning, except you just can't drive on 8th Avenue. Stephanie?
Thanks, Ann. I want to remind our viewers we are expecting a press conference on the scene any minute now. Let's bring Jim Kavanaugh in, retired special agent in charge for the ATF. Jim, your assessment here, from those we've spoken to already this morning, Commissioner Bill Bratton, Malcolm Nance, they consider this, I don't want to say the word of victory, but tremendous if you think about the crowds of people that are in a place like the Port Authority on a morning like this, that only 4 people at this point are injured, and none of them are life-threatening injuries.
Right, Stephanie. Well, a good day for New Yorkers, a bad day for the bomber. Clearly, he's not a master at his craft. We're lucky for that. The way these bombs work, this is strapped to his body, and it malfunctioned in some way when he was either trying to detonate it, when he was walking, or when he did detonate it, and the mixture with Bill Bratton and everybody in the way NYPD's responding. I've worked on lots of bombers. They don't always make just one bomb. So that's why the police are sweeping the subways for secondaries, looking around. If you remember, in April in St. Petersburg, Russia, a suicide bomber killed 14 people, but he also placed a bomb first at another subway station disguised as a fire extinguisher, and that was later found. So he had a suicide bomb on him, but it wasn't the only bomb. So it pays to be alert. They're going to do their sweeps. This harkens back to Times Square. Faisal Shahzad, who made a Rube Goldberg contraption that he had in a vehicle and it malfunctioned, and he was a flub, left his keys in the car and so forth. We were lucky on that one as well. But it's most likely, Stephanie, that this guy's an inspired actor with no bomb-making skills, and his device was crude and malfunctioned on him when he was close to placing it anyway, or detonating it.
I want to bring Malcolm Nance back. Malcolm, would you agree with that? Because, Jim's assessment, because this man was clearly not a master bomber, and this was a crude attempt at creating a device, it looks like we're looking at Andrew Cuomo and Mayor Bill de Blasio making their way to the podium. Let's listen in.
All right. Everyone set here? All right, good morning. Everyone's got sound? Everyone's good? All right, good morning. At approximately 7:20 this morning, we had a terror-related incident in the subway in the passageway between 42nd and 8th and 42nd and 7th. The governor's going to speak. The mayor's going to speak. I'm going to give you some more details. Dan Nigro is going to talk about some of the minor injuries, and then Joe Lode is going to talk about subway service. Governor?
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. The first news this morning was obviously very frightening and disturbing. When you hear about a bomb in the subway station, which is in many ways one of our worst nightmares. The reality reality turns out better than the initial expectation and fear. You had a number of law enforcement agencies that did a fantastic job. The NYPD, the PAPD, the Port Authority Police, the MTA Police, they were all on it. You see behind us representatives of all the agencies coordinated. The Assistant Director of the FBI, Bill Sweeney, is here. So everyone worked together. There was an explosion. The police commissioner will go over the details. It was an effectively low-tech device. There were several injuries, we hope minor. And it was handled extraordinarily well. There was a disruption in train service and bus service while a sweep was being done. That's all being restored now, as you'll hear from Joe Loda. The subway service, except at 42nd Street, is being restored. The Port Authority bus terminal is reopened, so buses will be running once again. This is New York. The reality is that we are a target by many who would like to make a statement against democracy, against freedom. We have the Statue of Liberty in our harbor, and that makes us an international target. We understand that. With the internet now, anyone can go on the internet and download garbage and vileness on how to put together an amateur level explosive device. And that is the reality that we live with. The counter reality is that this is New York, and we all pitch together, and we are a savvy people, and we keep our eyes open, and that's what See Something, Say Something is all about. And we have the best law enforcement on the globe, and we're all working together extraordinarily well. I want to thank the mayor and the mayor's office for doing a great job this morning, and we will go forward, and we'll go forward together. All the service will resume. Let's go back to work. We're not going to allow them to disrupt us. That's exactly what they want, and that is exactly what they're not going to get. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Governor. Let's be clear, as New Yorkers, our lives revolve around the subways. When we hear of an attack in the subway, it's incredibly unsettling. And let's be also clear, this was an attempted terrorist attack. Thank God the perpetrator did not achieve his ultimate goals. Thank God our first responders were there so quickly to address the situation to make sure people were safe. Thank God the only injuries we know at this point were minor. But I agree 100% with the governor's point that choice of New York is always for a reason, because we're a beacon to the world, and we actually show that a society of many faiths and many backgrounds can work, and we show that democracy can work, and our enemies want to undermine that. The terrorists want to undermine that, so they yearn to attack New York City. But New York City is blessed with the finest law enforcement, and what our first responders did today was another example of the ability to address the situation quickly, contain it, and make sure people are safe. Let me just say, it's very important for my fellow New Yorkers to know there are no additional known incidents at this time. There are no additional known activities. We will wait for a fuller investigation, of course, by the NYPD and the MTA police and Port Authority police and FBI. But at this point in time, all we know of is one individual who, thank God, was unsuccessful in his aims. There are also no credible and specific threats against New York City at this time. But we will give you more information, of course, as the investigation unfolds. The first responders responded brilliantly. Now the mission of the NYPD is to secure all major transit hubs and major sites in this city. So you'll see expanded NYPD presence today all over the city. New Yorkers have come to understand when you see our specialized forces, when you see those long guns and those highly trained officers, that's something that should be reassuring to you. It means NYPD is on full alert and out in force, and that means you're safe. Finally, want to say, the governor invoked that phrase, we can't say it enough times, when you see something, say something. This is the difference maker. We've seen it time and again. When an everyday New Yorker sees something that doesn't make sense, hears something, sees a package, gets a feeling that something's wrong, don't hold it to yourself. Tell a police officer. They are the ones who can take the information and act on it. It's so important to speak up because you could be saving many lives by doing so. I'll finish by saying this. This is the most resilient place on earth. We've proven it time and time again. We proved it just over a month ago. We proved it on 9/11. We're going to prove it again today. The terrorists will not win. We're going to keep being New Yorkers. Let's get back to work. Thank you. Right, these are the preliminary facts. So it just happened a couple hours ago. So you have to understand these are preliminary facts. At approximately 7:20, in a below-ground walkway, which connects the IND line at 4-2 and 8th Avenue with the IRT line at 4-2 and 7, and that's the shuttle at Times Square and the 1, 2, and 3 train. Police were called to a reported explosion. Responding units found an injured 27-year-old male. We've identified him as Akayed Ullah, Akayed Ullah. He had burns and wounds to his body. Preliminary investigation at the scene indicates this male was wearing an improvised, low-tech explosive device attached to his body. He intentionally detonated that device. Looks like there are 3 other people in the immediate area also sustained minor injuries, but Dan Nigro is going to talk about that. The subject was placed in custody and transported to Bellevue Hospital. Immediate police response to the scene included members of the Transit Bureau, Emergency Service Division, Bomb Squad, Counterterrorism, MTA Police, State Troopers, and the FBI's Joint Terrorist Task Force. In addition, the NYPD Strategic Response Group and Critical Response Command were assigned to other key transportation hubs in other locations throughout the city as a precautionary measure. This incident was captured on transit system video. A further review and interview of witnesses is underway. A thorough background investigation into Akayed Ullah is being conducted by the Joint Terrorist Task Force. We are asking anyone who may have any information about this individual or incident to call the terror hotline, and that's 888-NYC-SAFE. Just as the governor said, and as the mayor said, we are New Yorkers. We don't live in fear. If you see something that doesn't look right, you have an obligation to come forward, call 911, flag down a cop, and give us a chance to investigate it. Dan Nigro is going to talk about the injuries now. Dan?
Thank you, Jim. As the police commissioner mentioned, the perpetrator detonated the device. It caused burns to the hands and the abdomen, also lacerations. Our EMS personnel removed the perpetrator to Bellevue Hospital, where they're being treated now. 3 other people that were in proximity of the explosion removed themselves. 2 of them took themselves to Mount Sinai West.
Is this the mob or is this the political office?
That are consistent with being in the area of the explosion, that is ringing in the ears and headache. So we have 3 minor injuries to people that were in that corridor and serious injuries to the perpetrator. That's it at this time.
Thank you. As the commissioners have both said, and the mayor and the governor both said earlier this morning, we received an alert of the explosion that happened in the tunnel, and immediately the MTA and the Transit Authority shut down the lines on the 8th Avenue line, the A, the C, the E. Many of them were rerouted. I will tell you right now, they are all back. The only disruption we have right now is that on both the 7th Avenue line as well as the 8th Avenue line, we're bypassing the Times Square 42nd Street corridor, and also the shuttle between Grand Central and Times Square is currently shut down. We expect it to be back up and normal by this evening's rush hour. I do want to also state that on November 6th, just a month or so ago, we had a tabletop exercise synchronize with the NYPD to coordinate our efforts in the event that something like this ever happened. And the result of that was today, in less than 2 hours, we are back totally up to speed and getting our passengers around. I want to especially thank not only the NYPD, but also our passengers and our customers for their patience. Thank you.
We're going to take some questions. Is there any history? The question is did the subject utter anything before he detonated the device? Part of the investigation.
Commissioner, where was the device located? Is a potential target for years. I know Phil can address this as the governor, but you typically have police on platforms and on trains, but there are a lot of these corridors connecting lines where you don't see it. Does this point out a potential security weakness and something that might be addressed moving forward?
All right, the question is that transit seems to be an apparent target, and are there any weaknesses downstairs? Listen, we have almost 3,000 transit cops that work in the subway system every day. We have the Strategic Response Group, we have the Critical Response Command. All parts of the system are patrolled.
Commissioner, can you describe, is it a belt, a backpack, or a vest? A little more about the device. And in the video, what does he look like he's doing? Does he look like he's waiting for a big crowd to gather? What is he doing?
All right, the question was, what does the device look like, and what was the subject doing before he detonated? John Muller can talk about that.
Without getting into too many specifics, the device is based on a pipe bomb. It was affixed to his person with a combination of Velcro and zip ties. The bomb squad is in the process now, along with the FBI Special Agent bomb technicians, of processing that crime scene with others. They're going to gather up those pieces, and we'll have a better idea of what the device was put together with and what was inside it.
John, any history on the firm? Any history on the firm? Yeah, we're not going to go into that right now. Juliet, hold on, one at a time, hold on. Juliet.
Did he detonate it himself, and was this done purposely?
That's, Juliet, the question is, did he detonate it himself? In the video, you see him walking down the corridor. That's part of the investigation. We don't know that to be a fact just yet. Right behind Juliet. We're working on that right now. Yeah, right here.
Is there a reason why we're seeing the incident weeks ago, this incident, more now, and we've gone years and years and years in New York since 9/11 with nothing, and now all of a sudden it seems like we are seeing more incidents? Is there a reason why?
There have been incidents, starting with 9/11, but I'll let John talk about that a little bit. All right, sure.
So, as you all know, since the World Trade Center bombing of 1993, and well before that, New York City, as the media capital of the world, has been a target of terrorist attacks in the past. There was the World Trade Center bombing of 1993, the 9/11 attacks, and in the course of post 9/11 world, as you're aware, there's also been approximately 26 plots that we can talk about that have been prevented through intelligence investigation and interdiction. As you know, there was the Times Square bombing, which failed to detonate. There was the Chelsea bombing from September 17th of 16, and then there's this incident. So clearly, due to an immense effort that is put into this by the FBI, the NYPD, our intelligence and counterterrorism people, and everybody else, it's an all-hands effort. We have prevented a significant number of plots, a significant number of attacks, but this is a fact of life, whether you're in New York or London or Paris. The question is, can it happen here? And the answer is, it can happen anywhere.
Did he claim any connection to ISIS?
All right, hold on. Right here, in the front row.
Did he claim any connection to ISIS?
He did make statements, but the question is, did he claim connection to ISIS? He did make statements, but we're not going to talk about that right now.
Is he reported?
Right behind you. Hold on, right behind you.
Where exactly did the device go off in the passageway?
It's at 4-2 and 8. He's walking eastbound to 4-2 and 7. And so it's from this corner to Times Square underneath. If you've taken the subway, you know what the passageway I'm talking about.
Where? The passageway?
All right, hold on. In the back? Yeah.
The subway system of this size runs 24 hours, 7 days a week. You know you've got it all covered. How is it possible to have it covered given its size and scope?
All right, the question is the size of the subway system is massive. How can we have that how can we have that system covered? Listen, this is going to take the 6 million people that ride the train every day. It's going to take everybody to have their eyes open, pay attention to what's going on. If you see something that makes you uncomfortable, make that phone call or talk to a cop. Give us a chance to investigate. In the back. No, we don't know. The question is, was it intentional, the spot where he detonated the explosive device? We don't know that yet. Right here, Miles. Yeah, we're not going to. The question is that are we at different locations in Brooklyn? I'm not going to go into that right now. This is part of what we do. We're investigating his background now to see what addresses he have, and we'll fully investigate him in the locations where he lives. Right. All right, listen, we're going to come back to you later on with some more information. Thank you very much. Thanks.
We'll give you an update as things become available, all right?
All right, just wrapping that press conference. I want to